Hey, this is Mark Pattison back again with another episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week we have Dianette Wells. And Dianette is a woman of adventure, and she has climbed the 7 summits, which is amazing. And she's got all these great adventures talking about when she did Carstensz in Papua New Guinea and the craziness that went on there and some of the different things that happened on Mount Everest. She actually has been up there 4 times, summited once, and still, may want to do that in the future. So she's very aspirational. She's got a great vision board. And through all this, she's had to overcome some adversity. Number one, getting divorced, and then the worst loss any parent can experience, which is the loss of your child. Her son was wing flying in Switzerland and crashed and ended tragically. But we talk about how she has overcome that and tries to move on and live in his spirit. So anyways, as always, we love all the love and the support, the reviews on iTunes. If you haven't done that, please go do it. Again, we just so stoked about this episode. So here we go. Dianette Wells. Hey, this is Mark Pattison again with another exciting episode of Finding Your Summit with Dianette Wells. Dianette, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I was so afraid I was going to hack up that name because it's such a beautiful pronunciation and beautiful spelling, but I think I got it right.
You did.
Okay, awesome. Hey, listen, so for everybody that doesn't know who you are, I just want to tee this up for the audience. And you are a total rock star, very brave soul that has been able to accomplish a lot of things. A lot of it has been surrounding the mountains. You've climbed the 7 summits. I want to get into these things, and you've overcome some really horrific things, which we'll get into, and it's all about adversity. So I think you and I, in some way, share a kindred spirit from the standpoint of I was going through a really tough time, and I grew up in the Northwest, and that led me into to the mountains in terms of when I was going through my bad time about 6 years ago. I started climbing mountains, and there was an article that came out in the Huffington Post called "How a Former NFL Receiver Found Joy in the Mountains," and it really was true. And so I want to get into that, but I'm broadcasting today from Hermosa Beach, California, which you're familiar with, and I think you're in Park City, right?
I am. I moved from Malibu 2 years ago after living at the beach my entire life, basically. And 2 years ago, I moved to the mountains.
That's awesome. And how do you like Park City? I love that place, by the way.
I like it. The scenery's beautiful. It's not crowded. Clean air. I miss California, though.
Yeah, there's a lot to miss about out here. And two, I'm from Seattle, as I said, and California a lot of times gets a bad rap for a lot of reasons. And as you know from being in Malibu, it's amazing that you can be a couple hours and be in the mountains. You can be a couple hours and be in Mexico. You can be, in your case, like 5 minutes and be in the ocean. You can be in the desert. It's just it's a state that has so much to offer and so much diversity from the north to the south. It's really a beautiful spot. So, for people who trash it, they just haven't been to all the corners of the beautiful state of California.
It was a great training spot living in Malibu because the single track trails there for biking, hiking, and then you had the ocean for all of your water sports. The hills in the mountains of Malibu for road riding, spectacular. You'd see people from all over the world training there. The only thing it didn't give me was altitude, but really if being an endurance athlete, Malibu was a great place.
So why don't we start forward and then we're going to go backward a little bit, okay? So my question then would be, if Malibu is this place with this amazing single track and ocean and mountains all kind of sprinkled into one, then why would you move to Park City?
I've known for probably the last at least a decade that as soon as my youngest went off to college that I was going to move to the mountains. And a friend of mine actually said to me, we were on a hike, and she said, beach or mountains? And I really had to think about that for a few days. And I thought, for everyday living, I want to be in the mountains. When I go on vacation, I've always gone to warm tropical places. So I thought, okay, I want a vacation in the warm tropical places, but I want to live my day-to-day life in the mountains. And, as far as single track mountain biking goes, I don't think anything can beat Park City.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a great spot. And the other great thing that you and I talked about before we got on was the accessibility with your 30 minutes from Salt Lake City International Airport, so you can get in and out. I personally love Sun Valley a lot, and it's just so difficult to get there, which in part is the beauty, but also the curse of trying to get to a spot like that. And so Park City was awesome, and maybe you'll come back to California one of these days.
Yeah, I basically had two parameters. One is we had to be in the mountains, and the other one was I had to be within a very easy 1 hour drive of an international airport. That left, most of Colorado off, if not all of it, those perfect little mountain ski towns. It left Mammoth off. It left Lake Tahoe off. It left all these places off because I didn't want to deal with the little airplanes and little airports because I travel so much. Mm-hmm. In Park City, I am literally 27 minutes to the airport. Yeah. And I just can't beat it.
Yeah, I've been there many times. And as you said, it's a great place to be there in the winter, great place to be there in the summer. So, all right. So speaking of mountains, because obviously that's your love, let's talk about it. Okay. So you did the 7 summits. Amazing. Incredible. So let's go back to 1999, and you climbed Kilimanjaro, which I've done a couple times now myself. And, so I guess the first question is, what led you towards this goal? Was this a stated goal that you had on the chalkboard and this is what I want to do? Or is this something that kind of grew out of starting to take your first step?
What happened was I was climbing Mount Whitney with 10 of my girlfriends, and I had driven past it my whole life going up to Mammoth to ski. Mm-hmm. And I'd always looked over at it and thought, gosh, I want to climb that. And so finally in 98, I climbed it with 10 of my girlfriends. And right before the summit, it was literally, I've never smoked crack, but it was like I wanted the next one. Well. And it was, what's higher? Where can I go next? And then I figured out Kilimanjaro. And so I did that the following year. I'm hoping either this winter or next summer to go back for my 7th time of climbing it. I've taken all my kids, I've taken my friends. And yeah, that was the first one. So the first time I was on it, Wally Berg, pretty famous mountaineer, was my guide. And all of a sudden I had this thing of, gosh, I want to climb the 7 summits. But I was terrified of heights. And, but I still had that in the back of my head that I wanted to climb the 7 summits. And then I met Todd Burleson, mm-hmm. Who owns Alpine Ascents. And I was climbing Elbrus in Russia, and he said, oh, you could climb Everest. And that just planted the seed of, well, maybe I can. And then I started just knocking them off one at a time. I took from 98 until I think 2003 or so, I took a break and was doing adventure races. So I didn't climb anything for those years. And then I went back into mountain climbing kind of full speed.
Okay. So we need to break this down. All right. So it's just not one canvas and you cover 10 years and you run up Everest and you come back. So, all right. So you go up Mount Kilimanjaro and you have this moment, right, where it's actually was on Elbrus where you have this moment where maybe the 7 summits could actually come into play and that you could actually do Mount Everest. Elbrus, by the way, for me in Russia, for the people that don't know, is on summit day is a bear. It's a long way up and back down, and at least it was for me. We got in a horrible storm and electrical storm. Somebody was killed and zapped by lightning, and it was pretty intense. So, mountains so often can be such a peaceful, beautiful spot, and place to be. And in a moment's notice, it can turn pretty quickly. But So you're back down in Tanzania and you climb. Were you, in terms of going up that steep summit day face? I mean, it gets steep, but it's not crazy. At least in my opinion, where there's periods like you're on Half Dome or something, you're looking over the edge and it's just thousands of feet down. I mean, it is down, but it's not crazy. Were you scared on top of Kili?
No, I've never been afraid I can't say I've been afraid on any mountain. I mean, I was afraid on the Matterhorn, and I felt like I'm not supposed to be here. So maybe 45 minutes from the summit, I turned around and went down. I have a pretty strong internal voice, and I listen to it. Mm-hmm. But I've taken all my kids up there. I've taken my girlfriends up. If I was afraid, I would never have taken my kids up there.
Yeah. So you a lot of it too, I think, is that when you're going up, it's one foot in front of the other, and you're so concentrating on just what's in front of you and not necessarily looking down and around. Of course, you're doing that on your brakes, but I think a lot of it, for me at least, has been just very focused and as you're going up the mountain, and that helps a lot, and you're tired, and it's usually very early in the morning, middle of the night when you're climbing. So I want to go off and then come back to this. So like myself, and as I started off by saying, I went through a painful divorce, which actually led me into the mountains. My bucket was empty, and I was just trying to figure out, which way was up. And so I was just like, I have to go do something crazy. And so I came up with this whole notion about trying to become the first NFL guy to climb the 7 summits. So off I went. So I kind of had a game plan from before I even went down to Tanzania. But I know that you went through, I'm going to call it painful, but you went through a separation and divorce as well. Was that difficult? Was that during this period of time that you started to climb?
No, I had started climbing probably 4 years before my divorce. I had been climbing and racing, and to be honest, getting a divorce allowed me to climb and race even more because I had 50-50 custody. Yeah. So when my ex-husband had the kids, I was free to go do whatever I wanted.
So what kind of racing? So 2 questions then. A, what kind of racing were you doing? You're talking about adventure racing. And the other part of that is for me, again, so much of the healing and processing, people meditate in different ways. And my meditation is through workout, right? Is through getting on a bike, running, climbing up a mountain, and just like, I've solved so many problems, running around the world, right? Hiking around the world. And that's been the beautiful thing about how it's played for me. But what was that like for you? So what kind of adventure racing were you doing? And did that also help you process through stuff you were going through?
I was doing expedition adventure races, like the long ones, 6 to 10 days. I did 3 eco challenges, a Raid Galois. I've raced all over the world, and they're just multi-discipline, multi-day nonstop adventure races. And during the divorce process, just hiking with my girlfriends, always climbing. I recently broken up with someone, and he didn't understand why I wasn't seeing a therapist, after my son passed away. And you can't explain to someone if they don't hike or do extreme sports or endurance sports. It's hard for them to understand that, that is my therapy. That is my church. That's my meditation. That's the time I reflect and review and, solve my problems, because it allows me to think in my head as opposed to, for me, if I pay an hour to see a therapist, well, that's a plane ticket someplace. Mm-hmm. I would rather go climb a mountain and, do my meditation and reflection then than have someone sitting there shaking their head at me, yes, yes, yes. And maybe they've never been through what I've been through, or, that's just not, I think everyone has different ways of dealing with things. And so yeah, for my divorce, that's how I got through it. And my kids had amazing lives, and I really got to play and do whatever sports I wanted on my time. And so it all just kind of, ended up okay.
Okay. So number one, you're preaching to the choir, me, in terms of how you process different information. And ironically, side note, when I was going through this, marriage counseling and whatnot, I went to like 5 different people with my now ex, and they all were divorced. So it was just making like no sense to me. And, there was nothing that was ever moving the ball forward. But, I'm not here to rank on therapists. I'm just saying it didn't work for me.
No, I think they're fabulous and they help so many people. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. Okay. So something else, which I don't want to gloss over, and it's a painful one to talk about. But again, the name of this podcast is called Finding Your Summit, and Finding Your Summit to me is all about overcoming adversity and finding success and finding that path, forward. And something you just mentioned about your son passing away, and so first of all, I'm so sorry, for that. I've got 2 daughters, 21 and 18. And I can't imagine. And I'm sure you've heard that from many different people, but my heart goes out to you. But I want to ask you about that if we can. Just, what happened. I want to find out a little bit more about your beautiful boy, how you made it through that.
I don't know if I'll ever make it through it. You wake up to it every day, you go to bed to it every night about it. But my son did extreme sports. By the time he was 17, had climbed the 7 summits. From the time he could walk, he was running. He was always climbing up things, jumping off of things, always trying to fly as a little kid. And of course, we had to channel his energy somehow. So we let him climb the 7 summits. And it was funny. He was 12 and he was threatening us with illegal emancipation. It's like, Johnny, first of all, why don't you say it correctly? And do you really even know what that means? But so I was like, okay, we let him climb. And he was always begging us to let him go skydiving. And even though we were divorced, we were always on the same page about that. And that is, you are not doing that while you're under either of our roofs. We're not paying for that. So the minute he turned 18, he went to Las Vegas, was sleeping on someone's couch, borrowed a parachute, and started jumping off of bridges. Then went on to airplanes and hot air balloons, and really worked his way up, and just got better and better, and started getting sponsorship and people paying him for his videos, so that he never needed our money to do it. It's just something he had to do. And, he was amazingly good at it. He was a wingsuit base jumper, because you go from base jumping and then jumping out of, airplanes and things to then the cliff base jumping. And, it always seems to up the ante. And then he became a wingsuit pilot out of airplanes, and then he wingsuited off a cliff. And then it became, well, what's the next step after that? And that is proximity wingsuit base jumping. And that's what killed him, because.
And what does that mean?
Proximity wingsuit base jumping is how close you can get to the wall. So that's the proximity. You're wearing a wingsuit and you're base jumping. You're jumping off a cliff. And a gust of wind got him. And, at those speeds and at that, how quickly the decisions need to be made. I mean, it can take a second and it's over. But he had the most amazing life. He's the youngest to do the Adventure Grand Slam. And I think that record will hold forever, because you have to be, I think, 16 now to do Vincent. He's the youngest to ever climb that. So he also went to the North and South Pole, just what the Adventure Grand Slam is, in addition to the 7 summits. That kid, he was a big wave surfer. He was towed into some amazingly large waves with Garrett McNamara. He went shark diving with Jeb Corliss, was feeding bull sharks. I mean, he was crazy. His life was insane and amazing. And I think sitting behind a desk would have killed him. That would have been a horrible life for him.
Yeah, so I interviewed this wonderful woman down in Malibu last week, Kathy Eldon, who actually will be on this week's episode. And do you know her?
I've heard of her. I have her book.
Yeah, so she's amazing, a really amazing woman. And her son, Dan, died when he was 23. He was stoned to death in Somalia. And when I first went down there about 4 or 5 months ago to visit with her on something else, a different project I was up to, and she said, well, let me show you kind of what we're up to here. And so we walk into Creative Visions, and she took me, navigated me through this like mini museum of his works. And I didn't know the story at the time. I didn't know anything about her. Didn't know anything about Dan, her son. And as you looked at the body of work, you would have thought that this person that she was talking about was 30 or 40 years old, like, wow. I mean, I can't believe the pictures and the writings and all this stuff. And so what you're telling me is that your son was similar in that way, that he had lived a full life already. And within that, tragedy struck. But, I mean, I'm sure he died what he loved doing, and not, playing it safe and being behind a desk for all of his life and whatnot. And there's no right or wrong in any of this, but it's just, I tell my friends, you just know that when I'm climbing these different mountains, I'm doing what I love to do, right? I can't imagine a life not doing this. So I can appreciate everything you're saying. What's that?
It wouldn't be a life worth living. I believe in quality over quantity, and my son had quality, and he was also 23 like Dan. And he told me maybe 6 months before he died, he said, if I die doing this, know that I died the happiest person on the planet.
Well, I think, I'm guessing this is what you'd have to hold on to, as sad and awful as that would be. I think you do have to hold on to that. And, you have to go back to what he said, right, to help you, bridge through the emotional pain that, that would bring, to any parent. So, okay. So listen, I'm so sorry for that. But, on the other side of that, it sounds like what an inspiration to everybody to really get out there and, be the best that they can be and really lead a life that's purposeful, right, on what you're doing. And he figured that out, it sounds like, at about age 2.
He always knew. And he showed us, he drew a picture in 2nd or 3rd grade. And he was parachuting while holding an ice cream cone. There was an MMA ring, a volcano, some sharks in the water, and then his house. And he wrote, "The adventure begins here."
The vision board.
I mean, it was insane. I found it going through all of his school papers, and I had it framed and gave it to his dad. It was like, he did every single one of these things, and he drew it for us. He was in, 2nd or 3rd grade. He drew this picture for us. I mean, it was the freakiest thing, but he knew his whole life what he was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, that's great. What year was this? This all went down.
What he died?
Yeah.
2015.
2015. Okay. So you must have been a great role model for him, though, right? With all this adventure racing, climbing mountains, would you say?
Well, no kid likes when their mom goes off to climb a mountain. And
they're not there.
A whole nother show on the double standard and chauvinism in this whole field. I remember being at Camp 1, and I'm on the sat phone with my kids, and they're all crying, begging me to come home. And God, I dreaded those phone calls every day because they were just draining and breaking my heart.
Yeah.
Then I'd look around at my guys. None of them had those phone calls. They'd call the wife. Some wife was complaining because, the tire was flat in the car or something. And I thought, that's all they have to deal with. These wives are taking care of the kids, holding down the fort. And I didn't have that. And even talking to people about sponsorship, they'd say, "Oh, you're leaving your children. How could you do that?" And I said to one of them, "If I was a man, would you be asking me that?" And he caught himself and he said, "No." I said, "Well," so.
Yeah, for sure. Double standard, right?
Horrible.
Yeah,
but
no, I'm in your camp. I get it.
They didn't like, when I came home from adventure races, I was a bloody, bruised, battered mess. And my son never liked that. And when I came home from climbing, my body looked fine. It's pretty cushy compared to adventure racing. And so, that part never upset my kids because I always came home looking the same. But my kids would rather have had me home baking cookies and, which I did when I was home, but even if they were with their dads for the week, they still wanted me sitting home. So, however, in their actions and how I've seen them grow up, behind my back to their friends and to their friends' parents, they would say, "Oh, my mom did this, my mom did that." To my face, they would complain, but it also, I feel, completely taught my kids that, nothing is off limits. You go for it. My children, all three of them, have never said, "I can't." It's just not in their vocabulary. And I grew up being afraid of everything, and my kids are afraid of nothing.
Well,
so
yeah, you've been a great role model for them and for others. I mean, what you've created is possibilities. And that's a wonderful gift to give your kids, right? And my kids aren't climbing mountains, but just in terms of trying to figure out what they're going to do in life. And I think it's such an important thing of like, rather than go back and say you have to be this or that, and just play the rules of the game, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, a dog, it's just all that stuff. It's just a lie, right? And that may work out right for the right people, but it's not the path that everybody has to go down. And so just, giving your kids that freedom and that I don't know, that voice of approval of like, whatever you want to do is going to be great and you're going to be great and go for it.
Yeah. I grew up thinking you had to be in the box. You had to have the white picket fence, the right car, the right house. That's exactly what I grew up wanting. And then I got slipped that first mountain, and it was huge, awakening, eye opener. And thank God my kids, don't have any rules to live by in that regard.
That's awesome. I want to go back to the mountains. Okay. And, I want to talk about one of the ones that I don't know if I'm going to do, and we don't need to get into the technicalities of the 7, but I went down to Australia and I've done Kosciuszko, and you decided to do Carstensz in Papua New Guinea, right? And I've just heard some crazy stories. Number one, it's expensive to get there, and it's tough in the jungle, and people aren't that friendly. Just in terms of potential being held up with knife point, and and then once you get into it, it's it's raining on your head for days on end. But just the Olvero experience. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience there?
I had to go twice. The first time, both times, no one was walking through the jungle. You were asking to be killed if you did. I've heard that's changed, and now they are walking through the jungles. The first time we flew to a town called Tamika. We stayed at a Sheraton, and I'm pretty sure our phones were bugged. It was a nightmare. The people who worked for the mine, I'd sit by the pool, or I'd go sit by myself in the restaurant, and all of a sudden they'd be sitting next to me trying to get information. We'd have a phone call saying, okay, meet in the lobby at X amount or at X hour. We think we're going to leave. And all of a sudden there'd be military guys sitting there. And it was like, they always knew what we were up to. And then the thing was, we were going to hire a helicopter who was there on other business, or that was there on other business, and we were going to helicopter in. And somehow the helicopter didn't work out. The pilot chickened out. But we had some friends who snuck through the mine, dressed as military people, and they summited and came back. And it was a woman, Christine Boskoff, who owned Mountain Madness. She got her team through that mine and climbed it. And we went home empty-handed, but I was very proud of her for getting through like that. It's like the Wild West there. you, so then the second time I went, we did use a helicopter. We got into this little village where, you're going to land at the landing strip, and there are children playing on the field or on the strip, and, animals are on it. So, but we land, we're in a little kind of a safe house. I've never walked around a village and felt so at ease, like people hated us. Immediately, men are walking around in penis cords still. Women are kidnapped from village to village. I can't even explain how insane it was, but none of that mattered. I just wanted to get to the mountain. So we finally, and this was the second time I went back, we avoided Tamika altogether. We were in this safe house. We get on a helicopter, we fly to the base camp, and it was a pretty crazy place. There's a glacier in the middle of a jungle. The rock was like a cheese grater. You had to wear thick leather gloves or it would just slice up your hands. It was a pretty incredible, fantastic adventure in a world now where it doesn't seem like there's so many adventures left. But it was pretty wild. To pull that one off with all those circumstances. And now, I know the jungle, I would love to go back and go through the jungle and do it that way, just to experience that. But what a crazy experience and place that was. It was crazy. It was the craziest out of all of them. I'll say that.
Well, one of the things I love about this adventure, and when I started out of this place of where my bucket was empty, and so I went down to Tanzania. But as I've been going around the globe doing these, it's as much for me about the summit as about the journey getting to the destination and going through that. And so, when else would I go to Moscow and St. Petersburg and the Caucasus Mountains and all these different things, in Russia, right? Europe's highest peak, and down in South America with Aconcagua and just all these different countries, cultures, people on the expeditions. It's just been such a growing experience for me. As I've kind of navigated my life towards my kids going on to college and navigating through my divorce and these other things. And it's just been one of the richest experiences I've had in my life. So, okay, so let's move on to Everest, right? So what year did you go to Everest?
I've been there 4 times now. The first time was 2005. I had promised my kids that I would be home by June 1st. And on our first summit attempt, we turned around at Camp 2. A storm was coming in, and we went back down to base camp, and they said, there's no way we're going to summit by June 1st. And I said, well, I'm out of here. I promised my kids. And, the owner of the company was saying, you're going to regret this. You should stay. But I told my kids, this is the day I'm coming home. And I wasn't going to, well, one, I didn't think anyone was going to summit after June 1st. It hadn't happened. It was hot. Ice screws are melting out. So I left. And of course, they summited 4 days later, whenever it was, June 2nd or 3rd. But every day after that for 3 years, it ate at me. So I signed up again for 2008. And I told the kids, I'll be home when I get home. I'm not quitting this time. Yep. And I was home May 28th. I had summited May 24th. It just felt like such a huge relief. This monkey was off my back. And I was so sure that I would never climb again. And I promised my little one, okay, I'm done. I'm not climbing anymore. I was moving to Bainbridge Island. In base camp, I gave away everything. My custom down suit, my boots, everything. I just gave it all away. So I moved to Bainbridge. That didn't work out. I moved home. And then the following year in 2009, I went back because my son was going to climb it. And I wanted to meet him in base camp. I was engaged. I walked in with my fiance, did the whole thing, saw my son. And then I went back was going to climb Everest again this year, to throw some of my son's ashes from the summit. And my daughters were upset. One was incredibly upset. And so I literally...
Upset about you throwing ashes, or upset about
me climbing Everest again.
Yeah. They don't want to lose their mind.
I had originally signed up to do the Triple Crown, which is Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse within 3 days. So then I was in that dream kind of went out the window when Johnny died. But I thought, well, at least I'll console myself with the climb of Everest, and I'll throw some of his ashes off. And the girls were upset. I was waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety. Should I do this? Should I not? And I literally asked my son and God for a sign. Like, should I, do this or not? I really don't know. And less than 48 hours later, I tore my ACL skiing. And
there you go.
There I go. So it took about a week to wrap my head around the fact that I wasn't going to be climbing. But some friends were coming, had already planned, bought tickets, bought their trip, everything to walk me to base camp. So now I walked them to base camp. And, a dear friend, Ben Jones, took Johnny to the summit and let him fly off, which Johnny had wanted to wingsuit off of Everest as well. So I let him fly off. And I got in the helicopter to leave, and I was just okay with it. It was, I wasn't heartbroken that I wasn't climbing it again. And I don't know if I'll ever climb it again. I still would love the speed record for the 7 summits. I know Vern Tejas has it now, but I would still love to borrow that title from him.
I just interviewed a guy named Colin O'Brady who got the Grand Slam speed record. So he did it in 139 days. So, I mean, it's just crazy to ski to the North and South Pole and do all 7 summits. So, congrats to him. He's a endurance athlete like you, and total stud. But I mean, it's a big commitment, right? And you got to get after it.
Yep. So I don't know if that'll happen or not for me, but if it does, it does. If not, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I love that. So when you're going through the Kumba ice fields, how was that for you? Because again, let's go back to what you said in the opening, which are you're scared of heights, and you're literally going over these crazy ladders through the glacier. And even though you're trying maybe not to look down, you're literally looking down because you're looking straight through these ladders down into deep crevasses. How was that for you?
The Kumbu is, I enjoy the ladders because maybe because my foot is smaller than a man's foot. I just had no, I can feel on the ball of my foot right now exactly where the sweet spot is to hit it. And that type of height is different from, the Lhotse face where you're looking 1,000 feet down. So none of the Kumbu, none of that was frightening to me or, oh my God, only because one, you're clipped in. You're clipped in all the way on Everest. Yeah. The only time I really got scared on Everest was when not being clipped in at the summit and I bent over to pick up a rock and I didn't realize how top heavy I was with my oxygen bottles. Mm-hmm. And I almost fell. Right over. So I threw myself back and, but otherwise you're clipped in. And as long as you're clipped in, you might have a scratch on you, but it's not going to kill you if you fall. The thing about the Kumbu Icefall is you have to be proficient and efficient. It's not the place to stand around and take pictures. I had a guy in front of me stop in front of this very large serac and was just standing there fumbling with his camera, taking pictures. I'm like, dude, this is not the place to be doing that.
I understand. Those things are moving.
Kill us all. Yeah. So it's, some men don't want to allow you to pass them. It's crazy. But my whole thing with that was just, don't dilly-dally, don't dawdle, just get through it. Be quick, efficient, always clip in, yes, it gets easier and easier walking over the ladders, always clip in no matter what. A gust of wind could hit you. The ladder could melt out a little bit. It's taking a few extra seconds and clipping in and being safe and but not standing around, doing whatever. Just you got to get through it quickly.
Yeah. So for Summit Day, how was that? Was that tough to get up and get back down? It's physically, because you're at high altitude and it's a mother to get to the summit.
It's weird because it was my second time and I was so focused. And I ate like a pig that entire trip. The men on my team had lost 20 pounds each. Their pants were falling off of them if they didn't wear a belt. I'm at the South Call, squatting over my pee bottle going, oh my God, my thighs have gotten so huge. What? How can I not be losing weight? And, I don't know, but all that, all those calories, all those meals I didn't miss. When it was go time, I was very focused, very on it. It was tough going up. Loch Barita gave me his, spare pair of socks and for sure saved my toes. One of my feet I couldn't even feel and I didn't care. I was willing to lose my toes to get to the summit. And he's like, nope. Put his pair of socks on my feet and they were fine the rest of the trip. Totally warm. I got to the summit and I felt like $1 million. It was 3 years of waiting for that chance again. And when I got it, luckily I've never had altitude illness or sickness. I felt great up there. I was up there for an hour. My guys arrived. We took some pictures and my Sherpa and I literally ran down. So I left the summit at 8. Chwang and I were back at the South Call by 10:30. By 10:30 a.m., I was in my tent.
This is Camp 4, right?
Yeah, the South Call is the same as Camp 4, but yeah, that's what it's called.
Okay, just understanding that.
No, Camp 3 to the South Call, which is technically Camp 4, and then to the summit. So I have to say, all things given, that was one of the easier. It's just a slog, and you just keep your head down, one foot in front of the other. I was so wanting of that day for so many years that, luckily I felt great.
Well, I'll be there in 2019, and this last May, I was on Denali, and we did not make it. It was minus 60 at the top, and just this ugly lenticular cloud, like the Wicked Witch of the West, was up there flying around, would not leave. And it was hard, but I felt so strong, so great. It's, I have to go back again this next May. I don't have to, but I choose to go back this next May and reattack it. So, I want that mountain, but in that case, Mother Nature won out, and that's what happened, and you have to respect that. I continue to up my game in terms of little nuances, nutrition. I ran into a sock problem too on that mountain. So that was a bit of a problem, but I'll know better this next time. But
I think Denali is harder than Everest for sure.
What's that?
I think Denali is harder than Everest.
Going up those hills, it's crazy. Dragging, for people who don't know, you're dragging 126 pounds with a sled and a backpack up the steepest slopes in, you're either in crampons or snowshoes and up and down and all over. And the weather is crazy. I mean, every night in our tent was minus 25 and wake up and there's snowfall, coming down from the condensation from the night before and crazy storms that came through. And so it was a battle. But anyways, ready to take that on and just kind of feeling like even though I'm getting older, I feel like I'm getting stronger just because that mindset, a lot of what we're trying to do. So what is on tap for you coming up? You've been such a goal setter, so impressive, overcome some stuff, so as you sit now in Park City, what are you thinking about?
I definitely want to do the North and South Poles. I, again, would love the speed record of the 7 summits. And I don't know what else besides that. I'm always up for an adventure. It just takes a friend calling and saying, "Hey, you want to?" And the answer is yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I mean, the thing I love about you is that, you're not like some people. I'd ask that same question to, and like, I'm just hoping to go to the grocery store today and go down and maybe get a little walk in and, buy some flowers or something. And you're like, I want to go to the North Pole. That's great.
Well, I have plenty of days where, my big day is taking the dogs on a walk. I mean, I'm not going to lie. This is not, every day is not some.
No, but you're thinking, no, my point being is that, of course, that's like that. And that's everyday life. And that's what people do. But what I'm saying is about, living adventure, an adventurous life, a purposeful life, about putting goals out there, about creating a vision board. Maybe you do these things or you don't, but if you don't write down a list and you've got your 100 things on your bucket list and what you want to do and how you're going to accomplish that, I think that's what truly keeps you alive. And you said something about 35 minutes ago, which I really related to, which is, I've been all over the world with my kids and going to these fancy hotels in Hawaii and whatnot. And I finally got to the point where, that for me, I mean, I love being around my kids, but doing those types of vacations wasn't fulfilling for me anymore. And so if I'm going to spend money and going to put a plane ticket together, I want to go do something adventurous. And that's what I choose to do. And that's where I feel most alive. Right. So other people who have that same spirit, I just, I gravitate towards. Right. And because that's what I like doing. So.
Hey, I love an overwater bungalow in Tahiti as much as the next person. That's where I think has been people mistake because they think, oh, you're always having to climb something or do, race or something. It's like, no, I equally enjoy, the fancy vacations. I like them both. And, I've met men who can only do the adventurous, crazy, hardcore stuff and can never just seem to relax and go, hey, what a great sunset. And then you meet the men who, all they want is the umbrella drink with the sunset. And like, that doesn't work either. Yeah. I finally hit a balance of, I really love both.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful. It's wonderful you can do that. But, I think where I'm whether it all falls under this, this bucket of adventure. It can be adventure in Bali. It can be adventure in Tahiti, right? So Papua New Guinea, right? That's a different way. Yeah. We talked about that. So, okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. I mean, look, if do you have any words of advice for anybody that's going through a challenging time, that would be, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a simple, what works. I mean, you've already talked about, what worked for you was really getting out and being in the mountains. And that seems to be your meditative place to work on yourself. That happens to be the same thing for me. But is there anything that you would offer?
I'd say no matter how hard it is some days to leave the house, because it's so easy to sit on the couch and get into that routine of, just that routine of sitting on the couch. Fight it with everything you have. Call a friend, make a plan. Even if you think you can't do the adventure, sign up for it anyways. Leave the house and do it anyway. Whether you succeed or fail, at least you attempted it. Don't give in to the couch. Just keep going, keep moving. And it's amazing what comes to me when I'm climbing or doing an ultra or a long bike ride. Like your show is, or whatever your summit is, finding your summit. You can find your summit on the local hill. You can find your summit walking around the block. Just keep looking for your summit. Don't give up.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. Okay. Where can people follow you or your journey?
I don't really have it. I mean,
well, listen, I know you got an Instagram, which is beautiful stuff, and you've got a Twitter. So
Twitter is all my anti-Trump stuff. I would suggest not following Twitter. It's like Angry Dianette comes out there. I was probably Instagram. I try to post my adventures there. I guess Instagram. I haven't really been into that social media aspect of all of that. I kind of do my adventures for me. But yeah, Instagram.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can post these in the show notes later. So listen, thank you so much for sharing, opening your heart, your adventurous soul, where you've been, where you're going. And I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, okay?
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Hey, this is Mark, and thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast this week. We had another great guest, and it is so awesome to continually have these different people on, talk about their different adversity, how they've overcome that, and what they've done to affect change in their life to become very successful. So, really appreciate you guys tuning in. So, as always, we love the rating and reviews that you guys do on iTunes. If you haven't done that, please go do that. It really helps us in terms of increasing our visibility within Apple iTunes. And anyways, it's just fun to share the love and what these different stories, these different people are all about. So make sure you tune in next week. We appreciate it. And that's it. Bye.